We got up to around page 77 last time. Now, there are two very important topics. The spirituality of the intellect, in other words, the utter immateriality, which we prove at least 4 ways. I don't know whether we gave 5 or 6 ways, but there are about 6 ways of proving it. And they're utterly perfect, those proofs. And if you want them set out syllogistically, in other words, in scientific mode, thoroughly set out, I'll give them to you. But I've given them to you in a sort of an easier way to follow them, the way we've done it. Then the other topic is freedom of the will. Those two are big topics. They concern man. Thank you very much. They concern man as man. Not as he's a plant with the 3 plant functions, not as he's an animal, but as he's man. Those 2 functions, the intellect and the will. The intellect determines the nature of man. Will is really a property of the intellect. But the intellect determines that man is man and infinitely above every animal. But the will determines whether he is by nature a free animal. His will has freedom as its necessary property. And we're going to work on that tonight. But that freedom is important. In the University of Sydney in Australia, I remember Dr. Destro, the best qualified psychiatrist I've ever known. Qualified in Australia, Italy, and that's considerable in Italy, and Great Britain. And Len Destro, a good friend of mine, said that when he went into the psychiatry department in the medical school at the University of Sydney, the first thing they said to him was, you'd better make up your mind about freedom of the will. If you uphold that, there's no place for you in this university. He didn't see a proof, no evidence, and the only thing we accept in philosophy is evidence, not popular fads, not what the local people are saying, the gossip mongers, or even the university professors, and enough of them all over the university and all over the world are bound to fashion. Remember, I think I told you before, when a certain gentleman came from Paris to lecture to us at Ottawa, I can't remember his name now, he said, en Europe, la philosophie est morte. In Europe, philosophy is dead. So an American on the faculty said, and what are you doing here then, sir? He came out to lecture us on philosophy. He said, I came for the funeral. What a silly remark to make. He came for the funeral. So philosophy is at a low ebb all over the world. Consequently, psychology and psychiatry and political science and all the rest of it, in a hell of a mess.
Economics.
Pardon?
Economics.
Economics? Yeah, economics particularly. We had a wonderful man in the Aquinas Academy in Sydney, Dr. Henry George Pierce, who maintained that the economist in the best, that in the modern world that had really hit economics right on the head was Henry George. His name was Henry George Pierce. He was a medical practitioner and he took up the study of economics because he said it was necessary. First-class philosopher, first-class economist, and first-class medical man. He was the head of the biggest Catholic hospital in the Southern Hemisphere. He was a great friend of mine. But so economics is in a mess. The United States is coming into the biggest mess it's ever been in, and it's all around all of this stuff. Psychiatry, if you don't accept determinism, then you can practice psychiatry. But if you accept determinism, what the heck's the good of practicing psychiatry? But there are amateur psychiatrists in all the governments. And in ethics, if there's no free will, there's no science of ethics. Not personal ethics, family ethics, or the ethics of civil society. What the psychiatrist does, this is his function, to remove the impediments to freedom. That's his proper function, to remove the impediments to freedom. Some claim that man is utterly determined. He has no freedom at all. Others claim man is completely free. He's not bound by anything. Others, such as ourselves, claim midway. It's an instinctive thing for man to marry and have families, for instance. but he's free as to who he marries. His nature determines that he be a marrying animal, but it's who he marries is another question, whether it's Fifi or a blonde or a brunette. Note that young children can be very willful. I'm speaking about this tonight because I saw it on television last night when I relaxed for a few minutes. Children can be very willful. And the current phobia is like a chemist who was at Niagara University said, "You never strike a child," very dramatically. You've got to give them a belt over the ear occasionally. St. Thomas wrote especially on that and said, there's no harm in striking a child, provided you don't do permanent damage. He made a special article on that. So there's the importance of some of these things.
Well, no, there's a line in the Rule of St. Benedict.
Is there?
That says, "And boys for such fault shall be whipped."
So, the importance of the freedom of the will. We're going to do that tonight. Woodbury wrote a beautiful report on the proof of the freedom of the will. And he wrote it in response to a colleague who said once, there's only one way you can prove the freedom of the will. He says, no, there's not. So I proved it this way and wrote it out beautifully. Well, I've put most of that on paper here for you. Sort of a paraphrase of it, if you like. So I've also put St. Thomas's proof on it. Now we spoke about love. Remember there are two loves, sensitive love that comes from what we can sense, and intellective love from what we can understand. And we know that. We know that difference. Look at that young man who said, when he went dancing with this very attractive girl, they were dancing partners, they were called in those days. Excuse me. And somebody said, when are you two getting married? He said, oh, I wouldn't marry her. But he went out every week with her, dancing. He thought her sensitive appeal was great, but her intellectual appeal wasn't very great, he thought. And somewhat I agreed with him. I didn't say so, I wasn't in a position to do that. But I did agree with him. Like the fellow who said, I wouldn't marry that little twit, when they were obviously out necking night after night. Or this one night stand on the television programs, etc. Manifest some aspects of that. So friendship, you can be friends with somebody, but you're not in love with them. And they're based upon three goods: useful good, pleasurable good, and worthy goods. That's in the notes, of course. The worthy good is that good which is worth having for its own sake. In Latin, they call it bonum honestum, honest good. And some call it in English, well, Woodbury did, I think it's the only one actually, honest good. It's the good which is worth having for its own sake. But the other two, useful good and pleasurable goods, they're for the sake of something other than themselves. Nature puts pleasure into biological functions, so we'll perform the functions. And protect ourselves as individuals and protect ourselves as members of the species. In other words, sexuality for the growth of and replacement of members of the species, and nutrition, etc., for our own sake, individual sake. So we saw all that before, methinks. But there are lots of friendships, sporting friendships, business friendships. I've seen men who are business friends, and I've thought to myself, what a superficial friendship. I've seen that at close quarters, I should say. And it was just simply because each knew the other, they could get something out of the other. But as soon as the person had turned their back, they weren't a bit interested in them. So, disinterested friendship is the kind of friendship you find when somebody is being attacked by a dog or drowning and you go and help them. You've never seen them before, but you go and help them. You know darn well that this is something you ought to do. God, for instance, has a disinterested friendship for us. But do we have a disinterested friendship with him? That's very hard to say yes to. Very difficult. We think of our own self, don't we? We have the friendship with him. We think for ourselves as well as for him. However, so will, the source of the appetite we call love, a summary. There it all is, I've laid it out. And St. Augustine summed it up beautifully on page 1 of his great work, The Confessions. Frank Sheed, by the way, who was an Australian, you know, he left Australia at 21, founded the Sheed and Ward Publishing House in Great Britain. He married Maisie Ward. I've met them both. Well, he's dead now, I think. Yeah, I think she would be too. And I've forgotten now what I was going to say. Frank Sheed said something. Oh yes, I remember. St. Augustine. He said, to start self-education, one should read the Confessions of St. Augustine. He wrote a little book on how to educate, become educated, really educated. And he said the best thing to start with is St. Augustine, the Confessions. And it's amazing what can come out of that little work. His humility. You know, St. Augustine lived for 16 years with a girl, and they had a son. They called him Adeodatus. And then he sort of saw the error of his ways when going into a lecture somewhere. It was in Rome, and somebody said to him, what does it profit a man if he gains the whole world and loses his soul? And it sort of startled him. Turned around, couldn't find who it was. But he was faithful to that girl, never went after anybody else. His mother, I remember looking at her bones, and she prayed for him all her life and rescued him from that, apparently. But that girl was faithful to him too. He had a son called Adeodatus. A from Deo, God, datus, gift. A gift from God. That's what he called his son, Adeodatus. So, the big thing about it is, as we will see presently, the will is a derivative or property of intellect. In other words, it's the inclination, intellectual inclination. Sensitive inclination, you remember, we call passion. Now, I love ice cream, I love milkshake, I love this, I love kiwi fruit, etc. But with the intellectual appetite, we love understood goods. And it's different from the other because it's the understood good. And the thing we find, say, in young people keeping company in the loves, they'll know the girl is a lovely girl, she's a good cook, she's this, she's that, she's the other, but there may be something still missing to them to marry. Now I know a young gentleman, as a matter of fact, he's an atomic chemist in the university in Ohio, can't think of the name of the university for a second. And he's a brilliant young man, and he's been keeping with a company with a girl for many years. And they decided never to get married, which startles the mother and worries the mother. Never to get married. And I find that very strange, but they go on understanding each other. It's a purely intellectual love, not a sensitive love. But both sensitive love and intellective love are necessary for marriage. As one woman put it, when you know you're prepared to wash his dirty socks, then you know you really love him by intellectual love. You love the understood goods that you find in that person. So, as St. Augustine said on the first page of the Confessions, Book 1, Chapter 1, the very first page, Thou hast made us for thyself, O God, and our heart is not at rest, until it rest in thee. In other words, we're made for you, and there won't be rest until we get you. So this is a complete reversal for St. Augustine from his former life, his sensuous life. And as we know, he became one of the three greatest philosophers of all times. Aristotle, Augustine, and St. Thomas are the three top philosophers. And I found that those who will ridicule that have never really understood anything that those men have taught. I heard a man in McGill University one time when I was there ridiculing Aristotle as a philosopher. Why? Because his biology wasn't up to date. It's like saying you're a bad mathematician because you don't wear the right size shoes. Just as silly. Aristotle learnt a lot about biology, and also, and he's not given credit for it, learnt a lot about the habits of sharks and other animals, many of them, which are quite valid today. I think I might have told you this story. A friend of mine in Australia in the agricultural department said that somebody wrote into one of their journals and said that they'd recently discovered something about sharks, something connected with them. There are people who are experimenting with sharks all the time around Australia, even swimming amongst them. I've seen pictures, videotapes of it, and it horrifies me. I hate sharks more than I hate a snake. We have the 5 deadliest snakes in the world in my state. Anyway, this fellow discovered something about sharks, and my friend pointed out that it was known to Aristotle 24 centuries ago. And this fellow didn't know it. Another one who was like that was Albert the Great, the master of St. Thomas. Albert the Great made very accurate observations amongst animals, etc. So thou hast made us for thyself, O God, and our hearts is not at rest until it rest in thee. That was St. Augustine. So what we want, here's the secret to all of this. We can understand goods all around us. A man wants a cow. He's not satisfied. He wants to milk it. He's not satisfied. He wants to make butter. Or little Joe, he says to Dad, he's on the campus, and he says, Dad, if I had a car, I could do so much better in my studies. I could do things, obtain this and that, and I could go to libraries, etc. So he gives him the car. But he's not satisfied. He wants gas in it. Then he's not satisfied. He wants to go somewhere. Then at the end of the day or night, he wants to take Fifi somewhere. There was one at Niagara University. He drove down the lake, and he said to this girl, he said, you want to sit in the back? She says, no, I want to stay in the front with you. Then he said, you want to go a bit further? She said, yes. And he drove straight in the lake. We had to pull him out. Must have been in Australia. So, we're never satisfied. The little girl, Mummy, I want that new dress we saw in the window today. She gets the new dress. And a week later, her mother sees it thrown into a corner and just being ignored on the floor. These are all common experiences. We may have other experiences too. But the point is, it's limited, that dress, in its desirability. The car journey is limited in its desirability. Next week, Joe wants to go somewhere else. Next week, somewhere else. Always restless. Our hearts are restless because nothing satisfies us. Because everything around us has limited good. The only thing that will satisfy us is unlimited good. But is there such a thing? Some people get blinded by passion, say, and they see unlimited good in money. I knew a pharmacist, and John said to me once, he said, I'm happy when I'm making money. I often wonder if he's still happy. He didn't make very much. But others will be like a man I knew worked for the Shell company in Australia. There was an important man from the Philippines, Dr. Delgado. We had to see him off at the airport on one occasion. And he told me, more or less in different words, that he lived just to look at lovely girls. Well, there was his goods that he saw. Then somebody else sees goods here, there, and everywhere. But they're all limited. None of them force themselves on you completely to the exclusion of other things. He might take a lovely girl out one night to a movie, but then next day he wants to have lunch. Nothing satisfies. The will is a source of great unhappiness, and that's what's wrong with that person we were talking a while ago. Very lonesome. Loneliness. And I said to Father Woodbury on one occasion that, how did I put it again? Can't think of the words I use now, but the neurosis, which is anxiety and neurosis, is the most common sickness amongst men and women. Anxiety and neurosis. worry about the future, worry about this, worry about that. And it's all based in the freedom of the will. So, the ultimate friendship we ought to have is with the unlimited good. And we prove, and we'll do that in this course, though it properly belongs to metaphysics, but we fit it into this course too as the final course of man, the purpose of man's existence. God is the only one. We prove that. The only unlimited good. The only infinite good. The only one that can satisfy. That's exactly what Augustine was saying. So the only thing that can satisfy the human will is that. Now, we talk about happiness. I don't know what I've done here, if you just excuse me for 1 second. I've introduced happiness here and then we worked on it later. You'll have to excuse me, you know what I'm going through at the moment, and consequently sometimes I'm just not able to give the time to the work that I would like to give. And consequently, all the people who are going through this treatment all have great tiredness. Everyone that I meet there, it's the friendliest place I've ever been in. And all the people going there all express the same. When they go home, the first thing they do is drop into bed and have an enormous thirst, and then there are a number of other side effects of the radiation. We'll talk about happiness. I'll put that off here for the moment, later. But the will relative to other powers, on page 77. The will follows the lead of the judgment of intellect, but it moves or applies the intellect to consider what is in front of it. To other powers, it moves or applies them to their act. When we see something, the will wills us to do this. And the will enjoys the good of sight, will enjoys the good of a stroll, the will enjoys the good of nutrition, etc. The will is our enjoyment, as it were. Even the sensitive appetite, we're liking the eating of this watermelon, but the will is delighting in the joys that come from eating the watermelon. So the will is of tremendous importance. The intellect gives us understanding, and the will gives us inclination. The will is not a power of knowledge, remember that. It's a power of inclination. A spiritual power of inclination, because it inclines us towards the things understood by the intellect. And the intellect, as we saw, has immaterial objects for its object. And the two, remember the principle of reciprocation, reciprocal causes. The intellect and the will. Causes are causes to each other in diverse order of causation. The intellect informs, well, I think I'll put it this way, informs the will, and the will moves the intellect to its act. In other words, two different causes can cause each other, but in different orders of causation. Remember the example I used? The window opens. What caused the window to open? The wind. What caused the wind to come in the room? The opening of the window. Each causes the other, but in diverse order of causation. And we experience that every day. But there's how it is. This is the motion, the moving thing, the will, and this is the understanding. This causes it to move towards its understanding. This guides the will to make the will move itself in this direction. Now note the small bibliography I've given you on page 77. Now we come to the freedom, the proper treatment of freedom, on page 78. Freedom is lack of coercion of the will by an object or an agent. But be careful of the word object there. It's the agent that's really important. Some objects can seize us. That's what I was meant by that. It's probably not really a coercive act, but some things can fascinate us, so we get moved to take that as an absolute ultimate thing. I want that book, I want this, I want that. Like a friend of mine, he was a professor, he died some years ago. When he got a new book, he'd caress it, the cover. We all thought he was a nut. He'd caress it. He was so in love with nice things. He ended up with a library of about 7,000 books, the same as I've got, and he had all these caressings to do. Now, point number one. How many kinds of freedom are there? There's the freedom of execution and the freedom of specification. Execution, carrying it out, and freedom of specification. For instance, if I'm tied up in a cell, I don't have the freedom to carry out lots of things I would like to do. But the freedom of specification means we can specify what we're going to do. Now, the freedom of specification, there are three kinds. Technological freedom. We're technologically free to build a bridge over the gorge. Today, we're technologically free to fly to the moon. Then, psychological freedom. Some people are psychologically free to operate on another person and to see blood and to cut into flesh, etc., to help them. Others are not. Ooh, I couldn't do that. A cousin of mine had about a 12-foot python around her neck to be photographed. I couldn't do that. Moral freedom. Are we morally free to do this or do that? There are people who are psychologically free today to have an abortion, but they're not morally free. They suppose are moral. They think because we're technically free and psychologically free, therefore we're morally free. That is utterly false. Now, moral freedom may be of three kinds. We could divide them up. Freedom of the individual, freedom within the family, and freedom in civil society. Now what we know to know is which acts are free and which are determined. Let's read that little text there. We have choice with respect to what we do not will of necessity or by natural instinct. Some things we will by necessity or natural instinct. That we will to be happy, we're not free about that. But to natural instinct determines that. Hence, other animals that are moved by act by natural instinct are said not to be moved by free choice. I'm forever warning people when I was teaching students, forever warning them, don't humanize animals. What's his name? The Wind in the Willows. Graham. Yeah, Toad of Toad Hall, etc., and the Mole, etc. Wonderful little book.
Kenneth Graham? No.
I can't think of his name now.
Kenneth Graham?
Might be right. I think Graham is in the name somewhere. Wonderful little book about the mole who went abroad and sort of mixed with animals, other animals. They're all humans. Toad of Toad Hall. They even made an opera out of it. But it's humanizing animals. But people say, the characteristic example I use is when in Sydney, Australia, this Canadian girl that stayed with us there for a while was in the classroom. Was out in Koala Park, it's called. And here she is with a kangaroo. And it's about this high, the kangaroo. And she's, look, he likes me, he's playing with me, he likes me, she says. Kathleen, get back. I said, get back, get back. He could go back on his tail and the big, powerful back legs could come up with claws like that and just rip her. And I'm trying to say, get back. Finally had to grab her and pull her back. I said, you're looking at him with your eyes. He's looking at you instinctively. And it's well known that, for instance, a kangaroo will flee always. They're timid animals. But unless they get used to humans around, something like that. But if it's cornered, it'll go back to a tree and it'll rip a dog open, for instance. So you have to be careful. Look at that man in Australia too. They had a circus with lions. And he just got so familiar with them he didn't even properly close the door. Next thing, the gate. Next thing, the animal was out, and on the television news we saw hit a lion running this way with his left shoulder and arm, and another lion running away with another part, torn to pieces. You'd be very friendly, but that's from our viewpoint. They're acting instinctively. And that was on that chimpanzee the other day, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Dr. Barnett said to me, he was reading up a bit on animals, and with his work on evolution, of course, and he says that if you're ever cornered in a cage with a chimpanzee, I said, how would I be cornered in a cage with a chimpanzee? He
Useful
said,
advice.
Useful advice. He said, kill it, because before the night is finished, it'll kill you. 3 times the strength of a man. And they act instinctively. I'm not surprised. So you just have to watch those things.
Did he tell you how to kill it?
That was the point here. I said to you, how do you kill it? You talk it to death, do you?
Tax him.
But
Tax him. Tax. Income tax. Tax him to death.
oh, income tax. Tax him to death. That's good. So anyway, they act instinctively. That's the point. They're not free. And we think, there was another case I knew of many years ago. I thought of this when I was in Sri Lanka, Ceylon it was called when I was there. A fellow was playing with his panther, black panther. And he was just enjoying patting it like this. The next thing, the black panther started to chew his hand. The man had to yell for somebody to bring a gun and kill the thing. Yet it was his best pet. You just don't know with animals, brute animals that is. Because I've had girls in classrooms say, just like my boyfriend. Now, is the will determined in any of its acts? I want to deal with necessity first, and it's useful to see that there are 4 ways we can have a proposition, a statement, a judgment, if you like. I've given the definitions, the 4 modal propositions, as they're called. The possible is that which can be. That should be the word of emphasis there. Perhaps I should have underlined that. The impossible is that which cannot be. The necessary is that which cannot not be. It must be, in other words. And the contingent is that which can not be. They're very important, the distinction there. That which cannot not be is the necessary. Is that the way the will is? There are diverse modes of the necessary. Now, St. Thomas has given this out beautifully in a lovely article. Given the reference there somewhere. From intrinsic causes. Remember the causes? There are 4 causes. They're the intrinsic causes, the inside causes, form and matter. They're the extrinsic causes. My mind's going blank. There's the final cause or purpose of the thing, but not necessarily, and the efficient cause. Now let's look at them. How is the will? From intrinsic causes, the form and the matter. There's a material cause. What is composed from contraries is corruptible. Body and soul, for instance. What is stone is splittable. That's from material cause. Stone is necessarily splittable. It might be hard in some particular cases. But what is composed from contraries is corruptible. Now that's a necessary thing for matter. Now the form. A triangle has 3 angles. For example, also, will has natural necessity in every act to will happiness. The will is by nature instinctively moving towards happiness, desiring happiness. So this kind of necessity is not repugnant to the will, those kind of necessities. Will, being spiritual, is immune from the material mode, but conjoined to a body, it becomes affected by bodily conditions. For example, man cannot will to fly away without wings. Now from extrinsic causes, in other words, the end, the final cause, or the efficient cause. Because of end. When an agent cannot attain an end without given means. In other words, for example, life without food, travel without a vehicle. So there's necessity of the end, also called utility. Well, that's not repugnant to freedom of the will. Even when it is possible to attain the end in one way only. B, because of the agent. Necessity of coercion. For example, when someone is forced by an agent so that he is not able to do the contrary. This is against freedom. That's the violent, notion of the violent. There's where we can be determined, where determinism is according to these people. That we're completely determined all the way. No, we're not. The onus is on them to prove it, by the way. That's what I find very aggravating amongst a lot of things that people oppose us on. The traditional philosophers. They oppose us on things, but they'll say, for instance, the proof of the existence of God. Don't conclude. And I have yet to see one of these people put the proofs down. Even those who support the proofs put them down in a shoddy manner. The best man I've ever seen is either Garrigou-Lagrange, who lived at the early part of the 20th century, or his pupil, Woodbury. And I was Woodbury's pupil. So those two men, they've really set out the proofs of the existence of God splendidly. Others do them more succinctly, just very briefly. But as Dr. Bonnet said about Garrigou-Lagrange, I had 2 sets of his great work on this problem, on this topic, and he read that, he said, magnificent. Every argument is answered there on the existence of God. But they never show a proof there is no God. And to my mind, they never answer the proof that there is a God, because they never see it properly. That's why. So necessity of coercion is repugnant to the will, forcing somebody to do something against their nature. Of course, a parent will force a little child to do something against his will, or order him not to do something because it's against his nature to do it. So let's take a journey to New York City. Well, let's not take the journey, but let's consider it. Here's somebody in Niagara Falls who wants to go to New York. He can go by car, plane, or bus. Now, none of these means force themselves onto him. He's free because he sees the limitation of going by car. If he goes by car, he can stop off and start necking with Fifi every 100 miles or so if he wants to. If he goes by plane, he can do what I found very lot of fun in the plane. You stick your foot out when a hostess comes along with a tray of drinks or something. The only thing was she ended up, actually I didn't do that, but she ended up spilling them over me. That's the part I didn't like. Coffee all over my suit. Then go by bus. Each has its advantages. Suppose we said walk or ride a horse. Wonderful exercise. There's a goodness about it, but it takes a long time and a lot of effort. So each has its advantages. Car, you can stop off and see things. Plane, yeah, quick. You've got to get out the airport, etc. Bus, yeah, it's a bit tiresome. They've all got their advantages. So we're free about the means there. Each has its advantages and its disadvantages, its goodness or desirability and its undesirability. Hence, I'm free to choose the means I want to take to get there. Moreover, I'm free to choose the purpose or reason why I want to go there. For example, visit theatres, visit museums, study, see Fifi, etc., etc. If you knew Fifi like I knew
What
Fifi.
happened to Betty?
Pardon? What happened to Betty?
What happened to Betty? She's with
Oh.
Bob. Oh, she's with Bob.
With Bob,
okay.
yeah. Note that there's nothing mandatory about the means or the purpose. That is, these means or that purpose do not inflict themselves upon me. Maybe they do. The purpose might inflict it on me because my chairman might have said, look, I want you to represent us down at the meeting of the American Philosophical Association or something like that. You see, this could happen. So the end might be fixed. But then I might have the choice, and this happened to me in Canada. I think half of Canada went over to Newfoundland, to Newfoundland Memorial University, is it called? Memorial University? Well, anyway, over in St. John's we were. I've forgotten what the name of the university is now. And everybody went by plane, except me. And they were talking, some faculty one night, saying, I heard of one fellow who came by train all the way from Ottawa. I saw things they never saw and they've never seen. I saw lots of things. I enjoyed every minute of it. I got out at little village, or towns rather, and one of them worked, Donald Gallagher, who was the president of the Drancy Foundation. He said, yes, but Raphael was the only one that had travelled in comfort and saw things. We were all stranded at, is it Gander Airport it's called? Gander. Yeah, Gander, yeah. We were all stranded there with a fog. We couldn't get out of the airport. He was the only one that really enjoyed the trip. I saw moose. I saw different things. Didn't see Fifi, though. So it might be I have to go there for the conference, but I was free as to which way I went. By bus, by train, or by plane. And the university paid all expenses and even had a little sleeping cabin there. So now we come to the big question. How do we demonstrate the freedom of the human will? Remember, my friends, there are 4 ways you can argue. These are just little reminders. We can demonstrate. Demonstration. Then there's dialectic. Then there's rhetoric. And finally, I think we call it poetic. Poetic argumentation. Rhetoric is sometimes called, particularly in French, political argumentation. And poetic is called sometimes literary argumentation, especially in French. La démonstration politique, they call it. Now, demonstration means we have evidence. We can prove it. That's all there is to it. Dialectic is a preparation for demonstration. For instance, I wonder if it's this or I wonder if it's that. Take capital punishment. Is it this? Is it? Some will say, oh, I'm against capital punishment. You should have rehabilitation. Others will say, oh, it doesn't bring my daughter back. Others will say something else. All giving different things. Which one is right? That's what the dialectic is arguing with them. Then the demonstration proves which one of those opinions is right. Rhetoric, of course. Who's the master of rhetoric today? Exactly. Master of rhetoric. It may tell you nothing, but it's beautifully put and puts it out. Rhetoric, these two are an appeal to the intellect. This one's an appeal to the will, rhetoric. You're dangling, as it were, a bait in front of the human will. I'd like to hear that. I'd like to hear that. This one is the language used.
Poetic?
Poetic, yes, the language used. For instance, you might say, he smashed her to the ground. He didn't just beat her and push her over or something. He smashed her to the ground. That's poetic, you see. And in other words, literary argumentation, the choice of words. There's an example in Vincent Edward Smith's work on logic, the elements of logic. He says there somewhere, he gives an example of a great poet who wrote a very great poem. And it just had something lacking, this poem. He changed a word, and it brought the whole poem to life. Everybody noted it straight away. Just one word can bring an argument to life. But the only... I'm sorry.
Is the poetic also an appeal to the will?
No, to the imagination.
The imagination.
Thank you. I'm glad you thought of that. Yes, an appeal to the imagination. You see the words, like smashed. You see the words, the imagery of that word, smash. You see, what do you call them? Reporters, newspaper reporters use it all the time. Even the television. You'll see. Pardon?
Especially the television.
Yeah, especially the television. You'll see something on there, and I say to myself, what the hell has this got to do with what's on? There's a fire. You'll see a police car with a flash. You'll see a fire engine with a flash. You'll see all this. You'll see that. It's nothing to do with the pitiful state of the people whose home was burned, etc., etc. But I show you all these various things. That's using imagery in the same way. This is based on imagery, you see, in the imagination. Appeal to the imagination, appeal to the will, appeal to the intellect. These. There's a lovely sheet we've got, which we issued somewhere. I don't know whether I gave it this course or not, which gives you all those, the layout of the various ways of arguing. So what we want in philosophy, the only thing that counts is evidence, truth, arriving at truth through evidence. Just the opposite to what most people think. They think it's all a matter of opinions. Somebody said to me, I'd love to come to your class and hear all your opinions. I said, I don't give my opinions out, or rarely. So how do we demonstrate it? So, I'll just read the introduction to that. Man is free from the dominating influences of limited things around us. He's not free from the influence of unlimited good, provided he knows that it is unlimited good, yet the latter is naggingly always there. My computer nearly went berserk. It said to me, naggingly? That's not in the dictionary. What's that? It nags you, as it were. That's what St. Augustine referred to. Nagging in the background is there. I stood outside Ted's home on one occasion when I was a young pharmacist. And he stood outside crying. He didn't want to go inside. He had a lovely, successful pastry business right near where I was working at the time, managing a pharmacy. Ted was crying. His wife had cancer and he couldn't come in and face it. His body was just being eaten away. The funny part is I was the one that broke the news to them and didn't realise I was doing it. They tricked me into telling them what carcinoma meant, and etc. And they had a letter that they asked me to read, but they didn't tell me they'd opened the physician's letter. It wasn't addressed to them. But Ted was talking about their past life. We did things we shouldn't have done, etc., etc. Nagging, always nagging at people, the past. And that's what I meant by naggingly there. So, first he states the fact. Remember, what is there in a proof? There's a principle of reason. There's a fact. Therefore, cause of the fact. That's how the syllogism is properly set up. Did you learn that, my friend, in your prior studies? Do you think you learned that?
Yeah.
Did you? Good. That's good. I'm pleased to hear that. Because I know of many cases where it is never heard in colleges and universities. So, he starts off with the evidence. The argument is explained in the following way. Man has freedom of choice, or otherwise counsels, exhortations, commands, prohibitions, rewards and punishments would be in vain. Now they're just confirmatory. That's all they are, really. Will all be in vain. You don't give a reward if nobody's free to do something. Police say to dog, good boy, and they get to know those words as something pleasing to their ears. And they do that because they want to get the dog the idea of some things are pleasurable, doing some actions are pleasurable. So he goes on, he examines reality. Some things act without judgment, as a stone moves downwards, and in like manner all things which lack knowledge. Plants grow and act without judgment. They reproduce without judgment. The three functions: they nutrify themselves, they grow, and they reproduce, all without judgment. It's fixed, as it were, an instinctive reaction in the plant. And some things act from judgment, but not a free judgment, as brute animals. For sheep, seeing the wolf, judge it a thing to be avoided, from a natural and not a free judgment, because sheep judge not from deliberation, but from natural instinct. Now that word deliberation comes from two Latin words. De, meaning from, libertate. Libertas, T-A-S, means freedom. That's the case that goes with de. Libertate. from freedom. Some dictionaries I have heard from people who've researched this say the dictionary says it's from weighing them. No, it's not. It's not from libra, de libris, it's from de libertate. In other words, from freedom. That's what a deliberation is, a judgment from freedom. Now, where was we?
Number 2.
Yes, some things act from judgment, but not a free judgment, as brute animals. They act not from deliberation, but from natural instinct. And the same thing is to be said of any judgment in brute animals. That's why I warn people about animals. And each time I find occasion to warn them, there's been some tragedy somewhere. But man acts from judgment, because by his apprehensive power, he judges that something should be sought or avoided. Now, remember when we're dealing with, is there intellect amongst brute animals? They act from intellect, yes, but not the intellect of the animal. They never change. The things they do are the same all the time. Bees, the European bee makes hexagonal cells. It took engineers thousands of years to learn that the hexagonal cell is the strongest way to make concrete and other kind of structures. It took people lots of time to wake up to the most simplest of things. But the bees do this automatically, instinctively. It's built into their nature. They are computerized to act in this way and not that way. Remember the hairy Ammophila paralyzes the caterpillar? It did that all the time. And it's not taught, because the mother has eaten the father, and the mother then goes off and dies after she paralyzes the caterpillar and buries it with her offspring, giving them fresh meat and warmth. So it's not done from a free act, but an instinctive act, unfree act. But man, he makes judgments. In places in the south of France, I saw homes, beautiful home fronts, but they didn't extend any more than a few inches from the cliff that they were made in. The cliff was burrowed in with tunnels, and they had this home front. It looked at it from the front as if it had a front veranda on it, and windows and everything else. It was all on a cliff face. The house was burrowed into the cliff. I was in a similar thing in Spain, in the hills of Spain. These small people lived, and it stunk like hell because they had the ghosts living in there with them. But all they had was a front door, that's all. And they said, "Would you like to see our houses?" "Yes, I'd love to." So I came in with them, and whew, I had to hold my nose in there. But man acts from a free judgment. In the case of some particular act, is not from a natural instinct, but from some act of comparison in the reason. Therefore he judges from free judgment and retains the power of being inclined to various things. Our friend from St. Catherine's was telling me the other night about in New Guinea, that the United Nations learned that there was cannibalism in New Guinea. They sent a man out to investigate. He talked to one of the chiefs there. He said, "There's no cannibals here." He said, "I ate the last one last week." Another fellow standing by said, "Oh, we're fed up with that game." Please take a break.